Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Unily and Gallagher webinar on how to defend and expand your internal comms budget for 2024. So we've seen the waiting room piling up and there's quite a few people in here. So I know loads of people are excited to get into the topic. Before we get into it, just to give us a few brief introductions. My name is Kaz. I work for Unily. I look after our thought leadership and our research. So I get to go to industry events, get some insights, talk to some of our customers and share some of the good best-in-class examples at webinars like this. And I'm joined by Sean. Do you want to introduce yourself, Sean?
Yeah, thanks, Kaz. I'm Sean. I like to follow people like Kaz on LinkedIn. I'm strategy partner for employee experience and insights at Gallagher in a communications agency. So similar thing, I like to go out into the market, see what's happening with employee experience, talk to our clients, and obviously bring it to webinars like this.
So me and Sean have been interacting for a couple of years now via different events on LinkedIn and things like that. And finally has come the time we've been able to collaborate for a webinar. So I'm quite excited about this one. So thank you so much for joining me, Sean.
Thanks for having me.
So I'll tell you a little bit about our two companies that we work for. Our company, my company Unily, is an employee experience platform. So we're really all about trying to elevate employee experiences through the digital side of things via the app, via the intranet, and we have a proven record with that. So we've got over 5 million employees actively using the platform. So a big kind of data set and insight that we can use and customer base that we can use to share at webinars like this.
We're so aligned on our missions, Kaz.
Yeah.
Empowering better work to helping people feel different about work. So Gallagher is a full service communication agency, and we help people feel different about work, whether that's through auditing internal communications, embedding purpose and values, communicating change, or like leveraging your EVP. So all of those good things. And actually, if you haven't heard of Gallagher, the company, you've probably heard, if you're on this webinar, of Gallagher's State of the Sector. So that is the definitive annual report on internal comms and employee experience. So it's been running for like 15 years now. This year, we've just closed the survey that looks at trends for 2024. So if I'm getting my last year's and next year's, I'm living in 2024 already. But this year we had a record 2,301 respondents.
Oh, wow.
And that one is very
Extra
important.
1 person.
All of that data is currently being analyzed, and we're really excited about that. But I'm really also very excited to be sharing some top line initial findings just off of the kind of raw data today. But really, when the report comes out in February, we're going to be looking at AI, because you can't not talk about AI. We've just come from 2 days of talking about AI at the Simply conference. We'll be talking about people managers and who's in charge of empowering them. Channels, what's hot in channels, are we adding channels, taking them away, what's going on, and also deep diving into just how strategic communicators are, which is something that we're going to cover a bit today. So the QR code here is linked through to register your interest for next year's report. So if you fill that out, you'll be first on the list to get a download, and it'll also take you through to last year's, which is the 2023 report. As I said, it's the last year and this year, so all of the reports are there, but we'll be able to look at some of that data today. So very exciting.
You guys, for me, provide like the standard of measurement when it comes to comms and engagement. So we'll show you through examples of how to defend and expand your budget in this area, and we'll show you some early info stats as well. But for me, if you're ever trying to make a case for extra budget, it always comes back down to comparison data, benchmarking, and that's what Gallagher do exceptionally well. So you'll see some sneak peeks of some of that data here. And for me, this is the perfect collab because Sean and I could come together and I could use some of our customer examples, see how they're using the tech and how that influences, and also people that have been able to get that tech budget and how they did it. Plus, on top of that, all the Gallagher data. So we're trying to tell a story here through that. And the reason we're doing that is because what some of the data is showing before we even planned this webinar was that I think Forrester termed an EX winter freeze. So it's chilly out there today here in London, but it's also chilly out there for internal communicators. And gosh, that was cringe. And so what Forrester predicted is that in 2024, a lot of employee experience teams or teams that make up and drive employee experience, particularly internal communicators, HR teams, will see a lack of funding. And there's some extra stats from Gallagher to kind of back this up.
Yeah, and I think too that's coming through anecdotally from a lot of the clients we're speaking to, Kaz. It's sort of this ever-present problem, but backed up by this data. So in the survey that's just closed, 1 in 4 respondents said that lack of budget is a barrier. So that was the number 3 challenge overall for next year. So incredibly, incredibly difficult out there. We know that barrier to success is budget. But not only that, 2 in 3 communicators expect to see a real terms reduction in budget. So constantly being asked to do more with less. And you know what, when we look at lack of budget, it's the same ranking as last year. It's number 3. So it's kind of consistently up there. We need more money to do the good things. And that's sort of the ever-present challenge.
And we're trying to basically look at strategy, because we know, unfortunately, working with so many internal communicators, we know that it's a struggle. And so this webinar is trying to answer and look at more strategic political ways that we can overcome that. And yeah, I know this kind of shows that it's quite depressing, unfortunately, because if it stays the same, it's like a real term decrease, right?
And so I think obviously with inflation, although there was some good news on that, I think recently, but 2/3 are facing that kind of real terms reduction because they're either reducing or staying the same. You've got 1/5 of people just don't know. They don't know. Maybe it's an ad hoc budget as they go, but they have no idea sort of how much money is up for grabs for them. And then a lucky 14% of people are saying that it's increasing. And I'd like to know why. Maybe that's our next webinar.
Or get in touch, because we want to see your strategies too. But that kind of brought us to, we basically went through a bit of an exercise to interview some of our customers. Sean and I just came from an internal comms conference. We also had Unite, Unilever's flagship conference, and I've been on the ground, Sean and I have been on the ground asking questions as to, hey, we heard you managed to get some extra investment. How did you manage to do that? And so we've been answering those kind of savvy internal communicators. And what we got from it was there is no single equation to surefire budget increase, but there are different strategies or tactics that you can deploy depending on how your organization operates, the leadership styles that you may come across, and where power, influence, and budget is. And those 4 strategies are outlined for you on this slide. Sean had a great idea to come up with a quote for each of the different things. So honestly, the marketing team hate us right now because we were at this conference coming up with loads of ideas. I did a last-minute poll, so we've refreshed some of this content from what's being said on the ground as well, literally in the last half an hour. So the first strategy is, if you want to expand your budget, is lean into the customer. We know that, of course, customer experience is always going to be super important. And we always talk about EX, employee experience, equals CX, customer experience. But for me, I think we need to transform that equation and think like EX equals CX squared. And so understanding, if your organization is all about the customer and customer obsession, how can we leverage that customer obsession and make internal comms be the enabler of the best possible customer experience? I think you may, if you're in an organization, you hear things like the customer is always right. This may be a strategy for you. The second strategy is to zoom out to leadership stats. I've got an example for each of these strategies. Actually, we'll go throughout the presentation. We'll look some stats from the latest Gallagher survey too. But this strategy is all about being right. As internal communicators, I've seen it and I've looked at the data. You guys have invested quite heavily in getting more comfortable with metrics, pushing the tech you use to have better analytics, being able to manipulate those, understand how you're doing by different segments, people being really smart in this area. But it's about elevating from the middle level of metrics to, when it comes to the leadership board, when the management board are meeting, what stats are they going through? How are they assessing how we're doing as a business and if we're going in the right direction? And basically saying, okay, give us those stats. How do we then backpick that to the internal comms function so that you're elevating the conversation from the middle layer to global management in business information? Spend like a leader, act like a leader is the quote that we have here. So it's kind of like, yes, there are really cool stats around engagement, but what are those high level stats which are the leaders are interested in that we can increase with internal communications? The third one is working cross-functionally. So this one is about and I've seen this having worked in an organization where some people just didn't get the value of internal comms in the same way that we do, having being like cultural custodians, being close to our employees. And so this one is all really about bringing people together to go further. So sometimes it's finding your allies in the organization. It might be HR people, it might be IT people coming together around the employee experience, pooling your budget, resources together to go further. So team, it's all about the team together, everyone achieves more. And so pooling those budgets and going further, and sometimes making the case, not just as an internal comms department, but as a cross-functional employee experience driven the team. And the fourth one is to be a strategy enabler. I've got a great example for this one that I'm really excited to share. But it's basically about how leadership are, and I've seen this, leaders sometimes get very hyper obsessed with a particular pillar of the strategy, or a new strategy is released and it's drummed into everyone, and you'll probably communicate it out. But it's like, how can we take what leadership are obsessed with at the moment, that strategy, and how can we then show them that we need a better resource and budget in order to deliver that strategy better? So be the change you want to see. And so it's reframing internal comms almost as internal as the enabler of the strategy and the change that they want to see in their organization. So those are the 4 strategies that we have. There's one kind of bonus one at the end, which I added very last minute. Sian and I just identified after a workshop yesterday. But for each one of these strategies, we're going to talk you through some stats that kind of support them, and that might arm you in being able to talk to that strategy and make it happen in your organization. And then we're going to look at, right, what's a practical example? Which organization has put this in practice and actually increased and improved their internal comms budget from implementing it? So let's go through them one by one. The first one is leaning into the customer. So as I said, EX equals CX squared, EX CX squared. So so basically thinking customer experience and going backwards. And so we've got some stats here. Sian, I know you've got some interesting insights from customer experience and internal comms relationship.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the questions that we ask year on year is around the purpose of internal communications. So like, what are we here to achieve? And actually this year, 1 in 5 respondents said that they believe customer experience is the purpose of internal communication. So it's fascinating to me that 20% of communicators are literally here to support this. And actually of all of the top communicated topics, 10% said that customer experience was one of their top 3. So there's a little bit of a disconnect between how important customer experience is, but how much we're communicating about it. But, you know, beyond that, there's 1 in 4, so 25% are expecting a brand and offering change in the coming year. So of course, if your brand and your offering changes, literally that's your kind of go-to market, right? That's your proposition, your product, or whatever is facing your customers is changing. How are you going to get that out to the world if not through your employees, right? So
yeah, that's quite interesting. So like what I would take away from that is, if I'm spending 10% of my comms on aligning better how we relate what we do to customer experience, but also the brand and offering one is, I know how quickly those sort of projects and programs can move. When it's like, right, we're rebranding, right, we're changing our customer offering, everything seems to move super quickly for those customer experience teams. So hopefully we can tap into some of that budget for internal comms as well, so we can move just as quick to support those changes that happen for brand and offering.
And I think too, there's that kind of even beyond just sort of the customer facing employees, there's that how can we make sure that everyone in the organization feels a part of this and helps to kind of build that customer experience, right? So it's not just, you know, your call center, your front line, you're in the shops, in the restaurant, whatever. It is through and through everybody. And I think what also is another kind of sneaky stat, I think 58% said that their employees had an above average understanding of customer experience. So there is this disconnect again between what we're communicating and actually how well people are understanding it.
Yeah. And that's like I think the tactics I would employ, and I've seen this with the example that we're about to go through, is that so understanding who are your customers, and almost thinking, right, the people that are tuning into the employee survey, the customer surveys, seeing all the feedback from the CSAT. If we're doing customer focus groups, I'd want to be in those rooms to see any possible customer friction or any customer problem that we're having. How can we support that via internal communication, so it's not something owned by a customer experience team or customer success managers or anyone like that, but actually it's side by side. You have this kind of like symbiotic relationship with the internal communicator, which is actually, do you know what, that problem you're having there with your customer, I think ultimately relates back to internal comms. And the good example we have for this comes from one of our customers, Kersner. So they deliver luxury hotels at Atlantis the Palm, in Dubai, for example, Atlantis the Royal, which is the one that Beyonce performed at and got in a bit of trouble for. But it was a great performance. And so they basically said, right, okay, we are a customer first organization, but in order to do that, we need to be employee first. So really what they were doing is trying to measure customer satisfaction scores of their organizations, adoption of their internal comms, and how they could, where they were seeing best in class customer experience. And surprise, surprise, what they found was that it was those that had the best internal communications, the most investment, the most resource. And so when that story is presented to leadership, what that says is, well, if we want to increase customer experience, then the equation here relies on supporting with internal communications. And so they did it through many different channels. So what you'll see here is one of the way they digitalized communication, information, and knowledge is in front of you. So what they did was, as they expanded their luxury hotel empire, they then invested all of that into capturing all frontline knowledge and sharing it internally, so that even if you're a call center worker, which I look like one today, as we were joking beforehand, and then, or if you're someone that's a lifeguard or a security guard or a concierge in one of their hotels, you should not have access to different communications, so you're delivering an inconsistent message to your customers. And so this was all about alignment, but not just about strategy alignment. It's about customer facing alignment of our communications and our knowledge and our information, so they could centralize all their knowledge through that platform. And so the case that was made for increasing budget was about, hey, we want to increase revenue. Well, these are the results we need to do it in, and we have to do it by increasing the customer experience, because that's a proven methodology that we've got. And so it all comes down to effective internal communication, knowledge sharing, collaboration, and alignment on all of that stuff. There was a really good point that Sean and I were discussing just before we opened up the call, which was around, if this is a strategy you're looking to employ, sometimes comms is not always the right word to use. I've worked with leaders that think comms is news articles, or just content that you need to create. It's a means to an end, but actually what we do is super important. It's knowledge, it's information, it's alignment. And so sometimes actually picking apart the terminology that we're using with leaders and those that are budget holders is actually important. Sometimes instead of using the word communication, changing it to knowledge is like something to unlock the budget. So that kind of comes as part of that strategy for me.
I think even more so, we were talking about again before the call, when it comes to particularly this example of like luxury, like hospitality, how key critical it is for the guest experience, for the customer, for the employee experience to be right as well. So thinking about terminology, employee experience, but the guest experience is so driven by the values of the organization, and that those sort of values are kind of repackaged and retold and kind of spread throughout the organization through internal communications, right? So that's maybe slightly less tangible, but even just as important.
Actually, you've just reminded me of something really important, which actually applies to this particular case study, which is that they used, so what they realized was there are high performing employees that deliver the best possible customer experience. These are the people that get consistent good feedback from customers via their feedback forms, and the people that like literally make the guest experience, their whole thing is about making it memorable for the guest. And the people that do those give good feedback. That was all shared on their intranet. And so when people get when someone delivers good customer feedback, the internal comms team are straight on it to share that via their platform, which of course gives the person the recognition they deserve. But also people can ask like, whoa, this person keeps getting 5 out of 5. How do I, like, what's the best customer experience to do that? How can I learn from that through kind of this osmosis via sharing,
role modeling,
communication, exactly, role modeling.
Yeah. Awesome.
The second strategy that we have is to zoom out to those leadership stats. So it's about going back to, okay, quite literally going to those with the budgets, being like, when you're making decisions on budget, what are you using to inform that? Do you have annual surveys, revenue targets? What are those big level, high level stats that you're using? And how can I, so that you're informed with, okay, this is what they're looking at the management board. Let me understand how I, as an internal comms team, are supporting each one of those stats that they're talking about.
And oh god, sorry, just jumping in. I saw stats and I went, whoa, it's me. Cool. Exciting part for me. You know, just sort of backing up what you're saying as well, Kaz, if we can go on to the next slide. This is like the first time we've asked this question, which is why I was nerding out just then. So you know, thinking about those stats as communicators, what are our success indicators? And that's what we wanted to ask in this year's survey, because we always talk about the purpose, but not how we're kind of measured on that. And thinking about thinking like a leader, in terms of success factors, the number one success factor that internal communicators are held to is employee engagement. Number 2 was awareness of the company strategy and vision, which aligns kind of with the top purpose, which we'll cover. And number 3 was behavior change, right? So those 3 are all kind of key critical for, you know, the business doing what it does and the bottom line. But what I think is really fascinating is like employee engagement for employee engagement's sake, right? Why do leaders care about? Why are comms people being held to account for it? We don't want engagement. We want what engagement gives us. And that's where it's about thinking like the leader. So if you think about some Gallup stats, engaged employees are 21% more productive, right? Productivity are what leaders going to care about. They generate 22% more profits what people are going to care about. But we also see that companies with highly engaged employees see 59% less turnover, right? So retention is a huge sort of money saver. So those are Gallup stats, but I think that's sort of like taking the measurement of our sort of communications to the next level. Like, why do we care about employee engagement? Why do we care about awareness of the vision? Why do we care about the behavior change? So, you know, it's maybe not surprising then that the number 2 challenge that communicators voted this year was around disengagement. So I'm being held to account for engagement, but my biggest challenge is disengagement. And I was like, but it's mine to solve. So there's like this part there. And so if we look at the next slide, which is what we're actually measuring, 57% of people are consistently measuring reach. So attendance at events, open rates, things like that. 36% are measuring that understanding, which aligns with then the KPI around understanding. But then 30% are constantly measuring behavior change. So when we think about what are we held to account for, but then what are we actually measuring, our measurement probably doesn't quite stack up. So there's a little bit of work to be done on that thinking like a leader to join the dots.
Ironically, misalignment.
Misalignment on alignment. If you want to impress leaders, right, you've got to measure more, but you've got to measure what matters and like tell that story and connect it to the bottom line, the numbers that they care about, right?
What's quite interesting here is that like it's so weird because you spoke about like the profitability stats, and that's something there's 2 sides to it. One is around like, okay, my leaders are trying to grow revenue potential, and so I guess you can tap into it from that perspective. But if people aren't forward looking, I think the retention angle is a really good way to go into it, because it's like, if we're measuring retention, I would be looking at where do we have high retention, where do we have low retention, and can we prove that high retention areas or people that have longer tenure, either in certain business units or certain brands or certain locations, are comms change and culture a big part of enabling that? And so almost you're kind of creating a little bit of a story that's saying, hey, if you want to achieve this, which has a tangible cost benefit, we are spending less on recruiting, we're keeping knowledge in the business, plus the better customer experience side, which we've heard about, then the way to do that is, these are the strategies we employed here. and we need extra resource in order to deliver it here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like if you've got someone trying to grow into revenue, we can build on that. But also I think retention, I know internal comms aren't the only people responsible for retention, but it's getting comfortable in that statistic and understanding it's not about transforming it. It's about, you want to increase the average tenure from 12 months to 14 months. There are small tactics, internal comms tactics that we can deploy in order to do that. And in order to do that, we need resource.
Exactly.
And so got a good example here from Pearson, one of my favorite customers, and I'm not sure if they're on the call, but Kim from Pearson is great. We did a talk at Unite this year, and they did a really good job of getting leadership buy-in to the Gallup Q12, which is how their organization are measuring some of the things that Sian just spoke about. So how are we aligned with our mission, vision, and values? Do people get our strategy? When they do work, are they doing it in the direction that we want them to? And so where they're measuring the Gallup Q12, it's like, okay, we've got leadership to buy into these set metrics that they are putting on the table and are making decisions based off of. Do you know what? As an internal comms function, I will take responsibility for these 2-3 metrics, and I will support these other 2. So if we're saying, okay, let's improve these metrics, you're saying we want people for the work they do to be more aligned with who we say we are and in the right direction, then that's on me, and I will own that and take responsibility for that. And here are 3 potential packages that can take me in the right direction. It may be like a bronze, silver, gold, which like, hey, you want to really elevate this is all I'm asking for. Sometimes it's a bit political, but you can actually be a bit smart around like positioning everything and then some in the gold, so that like the silver option, which is what you really want, looks quite promising. It's like those sort of like smart tactics that people in those customer facing teams, people that kind of closer to data, IT do this particularly well actually, are very smart about how they get budget for things. And it's about back picking it from those leadership stats and being like, hey, we have some options here. Here's option A, B, and C, or bronze, silver, and gold. Here's them costed up, and here's the impact we think they'll have and how we can measure it. And that's something that you're making decisions based off of on the management board. So, hey, there you go. The third one is to work cross-functionally to go further. There's two parts of this for me. The part of it is around quite literally working with allied departments, which may be your HR team, it may be the facilities and estates team, it may be your IT team, and kind of creating a bit of a squad or a working group around shared challenges. And we discussed this yesterday at the conference actually. Sometimes we see that there are so many common challenges across allied departments, but they see them as separate challenges. And what that means is they go out looking for point solutions, separate tech, separate investment, but actually, and therefore they find it hardest to get that investment. But if they can make like one single solid business case together, they can go further. Another part of that is, so putting together a shared functional business case. Another part of that might be quite literally pooling resources, which is like, hey, we have this budget, you have that budget. We don't have enough to get what we want here, but if we put that together, again, we can kind of like go further. I know you've got like these are your
these are my stats. Yeah.
Get off my stats.
One of the things that we asked in the survey is what change do you have planned for 2024? So some communicators are lucky enough to know what's coming down the pipeline, but I think what was really evident with these top 4. So number 1 was there's systems and technology change expected. 37% said that. 36% said culture is changing. 25% said brand and offering is changing, and 24% said ways of working is changing. Now, if you look at that sort of gamut of change, systems and technology is owned by IT, you could argue. Culture is a combination of HR and employee experience, brand and offering, marketing, sales, perhaps. And then ways of working is operational. So arguably as well, like you might have one tool to rule them all rather than replacing like individual solutions or individual sort of like strategic pillars. as a communicator, these are sort of the 4 areas that you can be tapping into for that budget. So if there's an IT change coming through, actually, hey, IT, I can help solve your problem by making sure everybody, adopts this new technology you're bringing out by communicating it well. Can you pony up for some cash, please? In a nice way, a bit more strategic than that. So I think, that's kind of one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it, so, we asked that question about what's the purpose of internal communications. 25% of respondents said that the purpose is to manage risk, right? So if we're managing risks and we think about what the risks are that we might come across our path as communicators, we've got learning and development. Often the L&D team is kind of beholden to retention. And so if there's a risk of people leaving, how do we keep them in the business? Learning and development. How are they going to know that we offer, there's all these kind of amazing social mobility programs, there's mentoring, there's like learning, we'll help you pay for your degree. How are they going to know about that if communications isn't telling them? Health and safety, absolutely huge. We want 0 accidents, 0 harm, right? So how are people going to know about, or how are you basically going to tap into the psyche of like being safe and taking your time? Great communications campaigns. Well-being, if people feel well, if they are not stressed out, if they are financially secure and you're providing all that sort of well-being stuff, there'll be fewer absences. So again, that's a risk and that will hit the bottom line. And compliance, right? So I've worked with organizations before where, for instance, they have like the annual sign off where everyone has to say, yes, I've read and agreed to the company terms. If that company can prove that everyone in the business has been educated and communicated to about those standards and has signed off, if anything happens and someone's to go, does a bribe or whatever, and they get hauled into court, that fine is going to be a lot less. That's a very simplistic way of explaining it, but there are a lot of risks that can be managed through communication. So why not talk to these departments and say, hey, I've seen some great safety campaigns. I'd like to, help you solve your problem of 0 harm or whatever. Budget my way and I will do some great comms and help you get that number of accidents down, for instance. So that's another sneaky way to cross-pollinate.
What's funny is that like each of these 4 things here have a very clear cost, and from my understanding, most leaders get this stuff. And so sometimes there's a bit of an assumption that like, hey, can you just help us with this little bit of stuff? And actually sometimes there might be a bit of a mindset shift, and internal communicators are the most like people I know, and so we want to like help, but actually like we want to support this stuff. It requires resource. And I think like if anyone remembers the rollout of GDPR, that was in Europe, that was such a big deal for us. And some of those teams got like point internal comms people if they were lucky, or some of them were able to just lean on the IC department. But I think there's a bit of a mindset shift, which is that if you feel under resourced as an individual, you might have to shift your mindset to think, okay, well, I'm an internal comms business partner, whilst maybe not in name, but if we want to support these different business functions to get the outcomes that they want, then that they are projects or campaigns that we can support, but that come with resource requirements. And so getting pally with like your health and safety department or your compliance department, ultimately we want those outcomes too, but understanding how do we get those outcomes and what are the internal comm resource requirements that come with them. I have an example that I wanted to speak to related to kind of pooling together. Wakahu, one of our customers, actually my first customer that I worked with when I started at Unily, so like a while back now. But they did a really great thing where as part of their kind of employee experience, they hosted like employee focus groups to understand like where are the challenges, like what's stopping employees doing work, doing it efficiently, keeping them like staying at the company for a long period of time. And there were various challenges that came out of that, right? Some of which related to internal communications. One big thing that came out of that was actually around knowledge being too siloed by different departments. And so when they listed the list of requirements, the way they were able to get budget was, hey, we need to physically work better to deliver knowledge and information and comms to employees, how they understand it, which isn't, hey, I need to go to the HR site. You see here an example of sustainability. This is from their platform. Sustainability is a complex topic which will be informed by your ESG team, your engineering team, you might have operations. It's a cross-functional topic. And so if I want to understand what we're doing about that, it's about like tearing that apart. So the way they basically were able to get resource was to say, these are the employee challenges. Here's one solution to that challenge. And we own it together as like different teams. And IT was a big enabler of this. And so they're actually quite smart and tactical. Part of it's not just about adding tools to the digital estate. Sometimes it's about taking tools away. And so what they were able to do is say, hey, we need budget to do this, but actually employees are telling us there's too many notifications, there are too many tools, there's a tool for each different department, then it's confusing. So let's work together. We want a big budget for this, but we are also going to retire some of these tools. And so it's kind of like, I think, again, it comes back to that mindset shift, which is about business cases and understanding how we're working together to deliver something together. And sometimes leadership want to see that as well.
I think interesting, one of the examples that came out of one of the talks at the conference we were at, Kaz, was sort of saying, I wanted the budget for this tool, but actually what I realized was that, by using such and such a tool, I can do away with this thing and this thing and this thing. And actually it meant that the scope of the budget grew by replacing 5 things in one. So
yes, they this like the technology things are always a weird one. If you're watching this and where you would divert resources towards tools or technologies or channels or upgrading those things, it might be, for me, IT they have confidence with tech and tools, and part of it's about understanding as well what are some of the challenges that IT are facing. And what I learned at an IT conference last week, the Gartner conference, was that actually they're trying to reduce communications. But what they mean by that is emails, notifications, confusion around what tools we use for what. So it's kind of like partnering together to say, okay, let's come up with one employee experience comms strategy. Let's align on that and get resource for that and work out, okay, it's not just a tool for a tool's sake or a tech for tech's sake. It's let's align on what are your challenges from IT's perspective, and maybe we can go further together.
One tool to rule them all.
Exactly. And our fourth strategy is to be the strategy enabler.
And we love to talk about.
Exactly, strategy. Gosh, that's difficult to say. So this is all about saying, and I've got a great example for this, where they were saying, actually, we couldn't get internal comms budget. We couldn't get it in different formats. We couldn't grow the team. We couldn't get investment in our content and the types of content we were producing. We had to do everything in-house, and I'm sure many people will resonate with this. But then what they did notice is that there's strategy. Everyone cares about strategy and leadership particularly. But before I talk about that example, I know you've got some interesting things here about the purpose of internal comms.
Indeed. And I think, strategy is what we love to talk about. And I think it's a bit contentious because I think last year, number 1 and 2 spots sort of swapped in terms of what is the purpose of internal communication. And this year they were like neck and neck. To the last minute. So
one in the end, Go Vision and Strategy.
Yeah. So there was like strategic alignment was the purpose, or culture and belonging was the purpose, and these two play back and forth. There's some more analysis being done over who says what, right, and what departments they're in. But 75% of people did say that strategic alignment is the purpose of internal communication, right? And to be super, super provocative, like nobody ever wanted a comms department. Okay. Very provocative there. People don't want the department as a means to an end, right? Communication is a means to an end. People want employees who are enabled to like participate in the strategy so the business can go in the direction that it wants to go. And actually, like the number 1 topic that was communicated about was around vision, strategy, and purpose in the last year. And so The number 2 topic talked about was organizational change, integration, and M&A activity. So when we think about strategy, we think about vision, where is the company going? What do we need to get there? And actually, we're changing. Comms is at the coalface of that, right? They're the ones that are sort of the in-between, leadership and employees to say, here's where we're going, here's why you should come along for the ride. And, sort of like very cringe as well, but like, think not what budget I can secure, but what can communication do for the company, right? So it's that's our credo. But companies are going through big transformation. I think change is the only constant. We heard that over the last couple of days at the conference as well. But like, how can comms show that they are supporting that change and amplifying the importance of strategy? How can you be a strategic enabler, essentially, to get that budget, to show that value? And I think you've got a good example.
Yeah. So it's funny because that's the thing we asked at the conference as well. We hosted these roundtables and asked what people would use budget for. And we can get, when we are the ones communicating, we can get into the detail, but it's kind of like zooming back out to that strategy. And that's exactly what WSP did. Interestingly, on the stats, it showed that organizational change, M&A activity and stuff was the second most communicated topic. And that's kind of what WSP were all about. They realized, right, we can't secure IC budget for IC budget. What do leadership care about? And what they realized was that what they cared about was M&A. But WSP have a strategy around acquisition. They've acquired many companies over the last few years, and they look to acquire more. And so the question they were asking leadership was, hey, can you help us increase our, can you help us increase our IC budget? It was, okay, can you tell us a bit about the M&A strategy? Explain it to us. Let's understand, okay, when we acquire a company, what's the process that happens? How do we onboard and enable those employees? How do they know what the WSP mission, vision, value, strategy is? How do they get buy into that? How do you actually literally communicate to those employees? And the other thing is around the reason we have that strategy is because we know we're better together. We can share that knowledge, insight, collaborate better across the companies that we're acquiring, so we can deliver better for our customers. Almost back to strategy 1. And so if we're acquiring with these companies, how are they going to talk to each other? How are they going to share best practice? How are they going to understand that there's a project going on in this company and maybe we could help each other on that? And so what they were then asking leadership for was, hey, we are the M&A enabler, and this is the way that we can enable the M&A to be as successful as possible. So when we acquire a company, it's not just in name, it's in how we embody it, and it's building them into the fabric of the company, and it's helping them do better, which is the whole reason we acquired them. And so what you see here is an example of that. And WSP actually, as part of their whole employee experience platform, they have this whole almost like a strategy or process where when someone's acquired, they go through these steps where it's like, hey, this is how you become a WSP company. We introduce you to the company, what we believe in. You can see some of our documents and collaborate across them, and you can see who's in the company. And that's a big part of this whole strategy and how it's been so successful. And so really what's at the core of it is internal comms. But what's being sold to leadership is, hey, this is a process as part of our M&A strategy. And if you want to get the best out of that strategy and you want to do it as quickly as possible and as best as possible, hey, it's us you need, and this is how we're going to do it. So that worked really successfully for them. And actually, we've got if you want to hear a bit more about this and you feel like this particular strategy resonates with you, you can access their session on demand, which I think will be available on the Unily website. There's actually a couple of these examples have, if you see one of these examples and you're like, I think that might be my one, then we have some resources or case studies that you can access after.
Nice.
And the fifth one, which we added seconds before we came live, is the sneaky pilot. So Sean and I were running a little roundtable at the Simply conference yesterday, and we were asking, okay, so how do you defend your budget? Where are you finding challenges? And we found that what strategy that worked particularly well for someone was, or someone said, hey, I want to do this cool VR AR thing to get people involved in adopting this platform. And like, okay, that sounds pretty cool. I might understand why you might do that, but how do you get buy-in? How do you get resource for that? And someone's suggestion was, you know what worked well for me? I did it at a really small scale and demonstrated its success. Can you remember the exact example of it?
Yeah, I think it was like looking at the one particular site or department or location that was doing like the most poorly and or the best, right? So it might be like, who's doing it the best? What are they doing? I'm going to go try and do that in the place that's doing the worst. But sort of picking a tactic, going to the place that needs it the most, trialing it on a small scale, measuring, the hell out of it, and then kind of looking at how you might replicate it.
And sometimes it's about it might not require any resource. Like in this example, they might have been able to borrow a VR headset from a friend or something and just test it at a very small scale and see, actually, is it going to have the impact that I think it's going to have? So what they could have done is been like, hey, so we wanted adoption of this new platform we've rolled out, or you wanted people to understand our new values. Well, we did a little pilot in this particular location with these employees, and we then surveyed them after, and they had 5 times, 10 times better adoption or understanding of those values. And so what you're then propositioning is, hey, we're trying different tactics to get what you want, and these are the tactics that are successful, and of course they require resource. So if we want to get 10 times better, 5 times better understanding of our values, or see better adoption of this new customer platform that we've rolled out, or whatever it may be, then you're kind of employing this like fail fast tactic. You understand if it doesn't work quickly and what does work, and showing data to show, hey, this location versus this location, or this site versus this site, we had different tactics and these are the outcomes that they delivered. So it's about kind of being like a bit frugal, nimble with your resources, but showing quick data that people can make decisions based on.
And often it's a lot easier to get that small budget if it is a budget request.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's part of the mindset shift as well. Sometimes we want to like boil the ocean, and we want to build into these like big projects and programs, but actually sometimes they don't demonstrate the value that you think they are. At least you can test yourself. Is this what you might want to do is, let's say if you want to get investment into a better video content and transcription, see if that's actually having impact the way that you wanted it to. You might invest a bit of extra time doing it yourself, or just create one video that communicates something, see if the engagement has the impact that you would have expected it to have, to then say, hey, this content versus this content, the reason it's doing better is because of X, Y, Z. And so those are our 4-5 strategies that we came up with, that we're able to unlock budget for different teams and different scenarios. And of course, it's not a one size fits all. You may find that you may tap into one strategy but need a bit of another one as well. So what we have here is just for our own interest to see, out of those strategies, which one do you think would work best for you? So I think you'll be able to see like a little poll on your screen, or you may have filled it out already, but it'll be interesting to see like whether given your organization, knowing your company and your employees and the budget holders, where you think the kind of the best possible tactic may be.
I don't know what's more exciting, state of the sector data or this poll. Instant gratification.
Actually, let me see if I can. Okay, cool. So I'm seeing, I don't know if, so there's a little like chat icon button at the bottom, which you can click, and I think you can see the results coming in. There's quite a good spread. I'm seeing like answers coming in for all of them. Oh, and be the strategy enabler is like shot up. So there's like 35% of people. And that's actually a really good one, because I know like how when strategy has momentum, it really has momentum. Cool. So I see more votes coming in. What's good to see is that like something is each strategy resonates at least with someone. So that's good to see that we haven't presented something that just doesn't resonate for other customers. Yeah. Nice. Okay, cool. So I think be the strategy enabler, which was the fourth tactic, almost 40% of people said that resonates with them. So I think we've got
A winner.
a winner. I will, yeah, that's great to see. So here are the kind of like takeaways for, well, let's share, we'll talk about some of these takeaways.
Yeah.
What I learned from that data is the misalignment on alignment data.
Yeah, exactly.
And actually understanding the purpose and maybe resetting back with leadership, being like, hey, just to double check, what do you think our function is and why do we exist?
Yeah. And I think so many organizations I've spoken to over the last year just haven't had the chance to stop and think about this. And I think it's something that we help clients with, workshop and get together and sort of sit there and say, what are you trying to achieve? What are you here to do? As I said, provocatively, no one ever wanted a comms like function. They wanted an organization that knows what it needs to know, people doing what they need to do, right? So
Yeah.
getting clear on what you're there to do and then working backwards on what you're measuring. So what's your success indicator and what is your purpose? And then that kind of number 2 point there is like, what does your KPI really mean, right? So many of us are being held to engagement. Why? Why did leaders pick engagement for your KPI? And what does engagement get you? Because once people are engaged, what are you doing with that engagement? So what do you do?
The Think Like a Finance Director one, a lot of that content drove partly what we've presented here, which is I had quite a frank conversation with Unilever's CFO to be like, hey, you get both sides of this. You're a money man and you work for an employee experience company. Tell me how I can make those link up better. What it comes back down to is metrics, but ROI metrics, and some of that's been presented as part of the customer experience stuff, as well as some of the like other strategies as well. So it's almost like, and maybe actually try that yourself if you do have finance leaders that you're able to get close to, be like, hey, so tell me, what are you really interested in and what really would demonstrate value to you? And that mindset one, I think, is come up, it almost like we ended up going back to that. I think there's always a bit of a mindset change. And I love working with internal comms people because they're like the nicest, most enthusiastic and inspired people. And they always want to help. And sometimes it's about applying rigor and be like, hey, do you know what? I would love to help, but this is what it costs, or these are the tactics that we can do, and this is what they cost. And here are kind of like some common arguments against IC budget, which someone said, these are some common questions that are coming up that people might be asked. And so I wanted to kind of respond to some common arguments there. I won't pick up all of them because we don't have time, but the AI one seems to be particularly pertinent at the moment. We've just come from a conference where it's come up constantly, which is, hey, can we just get AI to do it? And for me, it's about kind of, there are multiple ways this can be answered, but one that's particularly important to me is around authenticity. In like an age of authenticity, there's a bit of a mixed message around like, right, employees want more authentic comms. They want to see you, they want to hear you, they want real people, they want less corporate speak, they want more memes and GIFs and all this stuff. But at the same time, you want us to put everything through AI. And don't get me wrong, we have some great AI features in the Unity platform, for example, but it's about understanding how are you adding like that internal comms zhuzh on top of it. And so it can be demonstrating, actually, we have considered AI and this is where it fits as part of our internal comms strategy. But if you want real alignment, real engagement, that's not the way we get there. And we will have some time for questions, but one thing I just wanted to say is that Sean and I kind of like put our minds together and came up with this like little template that you can download after this webinar to help you communicate to your leaders how every internal comms activity, project, campaign that you're doing supports business KPIs. And so I did this as part of my like IT consulting days, and IT are very good at demonstrating the value of what they do. And I think we need to use some of those tactics. So I've stolen this from my IT consulting playbook, which helps you map out, okay, what are the company strategy pillars, any transformation programs you have, and listing all the internal comms activities, projects, campaigns that you're doing, mapping them together to be like, okay, this is what we do to support that strategy pillar. Also, it's actually quite a useful activity to help you identify if you've got any gaps. So if part of your strategy is about great customer experience, and be like, oh, actually, maybe we don't have a good balance there. Maybe we should be doing more internal comms related to that. So help you identify any gaps. But the most important part of this is the KPI part. So in the template, you'll see that it will encourage you to list business KPIs that business leaders care about, whether it's about increasing revenue, saving on existing costs, increasing CSAT scores, reducing the number of incidents, some of the stuff that came up throughout these presentations, quite literally listing them and saying, okay, this is how this internal comms project maps to these KPIs. So if you're looking to defend your budget, I would quite literally print out this template, fill it in yourself for your own activities, put it, if you work in an office, literally put it in the internal comms area and be like, hey, this is all internal comms are doing. This is what we do. And sometimes we think we're in a BAU mindset, but actually every year we're changing up what we're doing, whether it's refreshing our D&I campaign or giving it a new focus. Frame it like a project or a campaign and map it to the KPI that it's supporting. And so I hope this template will prove particularly useful for you, but also if anyone wants to chat about it, like download the template and what you'll be able to do is drop me an email to literally like say like, hey, how does this compare to other people? Do you think I've done this right? Is it the right thing to do? And you can actually, we can start to like evolve that journey if you want. So I'll give you kind of like one-to-one feedback on that template, tell you how you might be comparing up against others, whether you're missing certain projects or campaigns that I think you should be doing. And then if you want to kind of elevate the conversation further, you'll be able to kind of work with some of our internet experts that will help you build it as part of like a bigger business value workshop, which you can kind of then use to get extra budget. So if you do want to kind of take some of this and put it into practice, step one, download the template. Well, step one, download the template. Step two, make sure you get that Gallagher State of the Sector report so you're armed with the latest data. Scan that QR code to the right or Charlotte, I guess it's to your right. To my left. Yeah, right or left, depending on how you're looking at this. And then, yeah, keep in contact and let us know whether you found it useful. So you can get that by going to unity.com/feedback. We're right up at time, but I know there'll be some questions. So we'll spend a couple of minutes answering some questions, but also feel free to reach out. So if we head to the Q&A, where can we download the template? So yeah, that's a great question. You can go to unity.com/feedback.
I was about to say one thing that I really love about that template as well is like we were talking about today, the KPIs. When you're putting that together, when we were talking about your KPIs have to be literally quantitative. And I think looking at the questions, one of the questions there is about suggestions on how to capture KPIs specific to understanding of vision and values and behavior change outcomes. For me, getting very, very clear on like what is the like literal number that I can measure.
Yeah.
And that is about sort of when you take the values, right? The values can be converted into sort of behaviors. So if your value is, integrity or whatever, like the behavior should be demonstrable. And people should be like, if there's a choice, people are making that behavioral choice, right? So there'll be performance management measures around that. But I think in my previous life working at an agency, one of the other teams was working on like recycling, for instance. So why aren't people recycling was kind of the question. And they asked people, they had focus groups, why aren't you recycling? And it turned out that like people weren't recycling. This was sort of like I'm going on a tangent, but I'll bring it back. People weren't recycling like things in their bathroom, right? So you've got a recycling bin in your kitchen, but not in your bathroom. So your recycling from bathroom never makes it to that recycling bin. By completely working out what was the barrier to overcome, they built a campaign around like, I think you still see it like, it was like won awards and stuff like that, but basically like put your bathroom recyclables in the recycling. So by working out what is the exact problem that you're trying to solve, what is the behavior, it is like put it in the right bin, or take your shampoo bottle to the kitchen recycling. To be able to measure behaviors, you need to be very, very clear on what the discrete behavior is you want to change. So I think that kind of matrix will help you think about it that way.
And I think a lot of this might be like implicit to internal communicators. They may be doing it day to day, but not mapping it back to some of that stuff. And so when it comes to leadership, it seems like a nice to have, but actually put in front of them like this, it's like, well, actually it does matter. There's I know we're up at time, but I do want to answer one of the questions, which is around they're all top voted, so I can see which ones have the highest vote. So let's go with the one which is from Nisha. Hey Nisha, what measurement metrics do you use for engagement and reach? We can both have a go at this, I think. So reach, I think there's different parts for this. I think the core part of reach for me is about, can we literally reach what percentage of our is an enablement point. So what percentage of our employees can we literally prove that we reach with our communications? That's the first part. It's like, of our number of employees, how many can we actually reach and prove that we reach? The next part is around like, okay, now that we know we can reach them, of those that we can reach, how many are we successfully reaching? Are they not just reading, but the smarter people are looking at proving that they've read something, or understanding. The super smart ones will look at like time to read. So if you're publishing a new leadership announcement, someone just clicking on that doesn't count as having reached them. That's not engagement with that content, but actually understanding, okay, well, that takes 5 minutes to read. Someone plausibly needs to have spent more than 1 or 2 minutes on that article to prove that they've actually properly engaged with it. So it's a bit more nuanced than just actually being able to reach, but understanding when we reach them, are they actually engaging with it? The engagement one, I guess there are different ways of measuring engagement. I know like Gallup, for example, will do certain surveys that look at how employees are engaged, and there are different, like Culture, for example, different ways that measure engagement. A key kind of KPI that some people look at is eNPS, so Employee Net Promoter Score. So are they likely to recommend your place as a employer? And so that's kind of like similar to what you get to the customer, like NPS. It's changing it back to eNPS. I'll ask one more question before we go off, which is from Val. Hey Val, KPIs are valuable to our leadership with internal comms. Reach is easier to measure. So we can measure reach, but KPIs are what leaders care about. Any suggestions on how to capture KPIs specific to employee understanding of vision or values and behavior change outcomes?
I think I always think about like kind of almost like a funnel, right? So you go from reach to understanding to like, embodying to then like doing. So I think when it comes to understanding of vision and values, it might almost be like you're pushing it out. How many people does it reach? You could ask people, did you read that? Yes. Okay. Then you've got a kind of like reach to reading. I think it really does come through like, is the vision being realized by the business? Well, you could almost go around and ask people like, what is the vision? And what do they say? I've done that before with like values and sort of saying, what are the values? And people might get 4 out of 5, or they might get them not quite the word perfect, but they're kind of in the right vein. But then again, that comes through to that kind of what behaviors do you want to see, and how can you measure those exact sort of discrete step-by-step behaviors? But yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to be different for every business. Like it's, again, that leadership metric. What are they expecting to see? If you're looking at understanding, what does understanding get you? What does doing get you? And kind of like, can you follow it down the funnel to say, where does it drop off? Is it between understanding and doing? Is it between reach and reading? Is it between reading and knowing, So.
Some of it's about, like, as you say, like like what exactly you've just said there. Some of it's about formalizing it and literally writing it out, because we can get stuck in the day-to-day of like communicating, but like resetting it and being like, okay, this is where we are, this is where we want to be, and this is how we're going to prove it, and this is why we want to do that. Like those simple questions that, like, in fact, like as we come up to Christmas, like it's like a perfect time to do those sort of activities. And then so when you get January, you can hit the ground running. I know we're up at time, so I appreciate we've gone over a little bit, but hopefully there were some good questions we were able to answer as well. If you want to join any future Unily events, if you're a customer watching this, we've just released our latest version with some new AI features and content management system improvements for internal communicators. So feel free to go to unily.com/events, join that, or just join any one of our other events. We do like a little road show where we go on tour and do intranet masterclasses. So feel free to join in any one of those when we're in your city. And lastly, please do give us some feedback. Let us know how you found this webinar. There you'll find the link to the template that I recommended, and yeah, drop me an email as well, or a LinkedIn message or something, where if you want to discuss it, see how it can be helpful, if you want to improve it, ask me if you've got it right as well, something like that. Then yeah, please reach out to me, and yeah, look forward to keeping in touch. Hopefully you found this useful. Thanks everyone for joining, and thank you so much, San. It was a good combo with the data from the case studies, so thank you.
Yeah, I loved it. More like this, please.
Yeah.
That's the feedback.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Thank you, everyone. Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.